Back here on the Mitch Albom Show, Mitch Albom, Kenny Brown, and Rachel Nevada, with the news of George Harrison undergoing a surgery today for lung cancer. I think it brought to mind, a lot of people who heard that, just how much we appreciated the Beatles, just how much a part of our lives the Beatles really were. We were lucky enough to have an opportunity to experience that a little earlier when we had a chance to talk to Paul McCartney and interview him. This was before the news about George Harrison, which will explain why we don't bring that up with him. But here is that interview now on the Mitch Albom Show with Sir Paul McCartney. There are those moments in this job where you say, well, now, this ain't bad. And this next guest certainly makes that so. Paul McCartney doesn't need a whole lot of introduction, only one of the most famous members of perhaps the most famous rock and roll band in history on the planet, the Beatles, of course. And Paul actually has a TV piece of work, Wingspan, which is sort of a documentary about how he and his wife Linda formed the band that followed up the Beatles. It airs on Friday, May 11th on ABC, and then there will be a CD that follows. And I cannot tell you how long I have waited to be able to say those words. Welcome to the Mitch Albom Show, Paul McCartney. Hi, Paul.
Hi, Mitch. How you doing?
Thank you for coming here.
Okay, you're welcome.
It's a pleasure. You know, one of the things that I was most surprised about out of this whole Wingspan thing was that you were devastated by the Beatles breakup. We've heard so many stories about how all four of you reacted. I wasn't aware that it hit you quite that hard.
Oh, yeah, I was very brought down by the whole thing. What had really happened was we'd been having a lot of troubles, and the group had been breaking up. But I made a last-ditch attempt to try and save things and said to John at a meeting we were having, I said, I think we should just go back to being a little touring band. We should just get back on the road. We should just do some little gigs and just get out there and rock. And John just looked at me and said, well, he said, I think you're stupid. He said, I wasn't going to tell you this, but I'm leaving the band. And that was it. And that was how the news was broken. So we were all pretty devastated. It all kind of turned a funny...
Why are we just hearing this now? Like every piece of your lives has been turned upside down, left and right, and here we are now 30 years...
I saved it for your show.
Thank you.
You know that.
It's an exclusive.
You know that's true.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you waiting 30 years to let that piece of information...
No, I've told that to people before. It's you haven't read the Beatles anthology, the big fat book.
Well, I guess I've read it, but
it's an awful lot of stuff to read.
But I guess
and you read very slowly,
yeah,
right?
That's exactly the problem. You know, I'm only up to page 150. I'm right up at the Love Me Do right now. I haven't gotten beyond that.
Exactly.
Well, it's something that this retrospective shows, you know, your life sort of through the looking glass as a Beatle and then post-Beatle. I kind of wonder which, now that you've had a chance to look back on both experiences, the Wings and the Beatles, which was harder for you personally to live up to, being a Beatle or being an ex-Beatle?
I think harder was being an ex-Beatle. They were both great experiences, really, in totally different ways. The Beatles was like the story of four young kids coming from Liverpool and seeing the world and conquering it.
How long did it take you to grow your hair, and how often do you wash it?
It's always been fairly long, so it doesn't take long to grow. And we'd use any kind of shampoo.
We didn't know how the whole thing went. We learned together, and it was a huge success, obviously. What happened with Wings was, it was a question of how to follow that. You either had to follow it, I felt I had to follow it, or give up on the music business.
Right.
And I love music just too much to do that. So we did. We went right back to square one, and it was difficult. We obviously had to make all our mistakes in public, whereas with the Beatles we had the advantage of being in Hamburg. No one saw us.
Right, you weren't well known until you already worked out the kinks.
That's right.
Yeah, but then what did you find, like when you were doing concerts with Wings in the early days, that there would always be this pocket of the crowd that would go, play Yesterday, play Yellow Submarine?
There were, yeah, it was that kind of thing. I don't think they ever actually shouted it out, but promoters were the people who do that.
Yeah, sure.
They'd say, you're not going to do Yesterday? You kidding? Yesterday. Troubles seem so far away. Now it looks as though they're here to stay. Oh, I believe in yesterday. Suddenly we'd say, no, we got a very strict policy. It's a new group here, we only do Wings material. So we did it like that. In actual fact, when we first started, we only knew 11 songs, and we showed up at these gigs, and of course 11 songs at roughly 3 minutes a go is not an hour. Does not an hour make. No. So,
use some of that old Beatles material as filler.
No,
we'll fill that out with a couple of yellow songs.
No, we had to stick to our very firm, rigid policy. So what we did was we lied. And we said, we've just had a request now to do Lucille again. And again and again. We did these 11 songs, man, so many times.
Well, I'm sure nobody complained too hard. Stay right there if you would, Paul. We'll take a brief break and come back here on the Mitch Albom Show. Paul McCartney, our very, very special guest, will continue. Please stay with us. I imagine that you will.
Young boy looking for a way to find love. Nothing you can say will help him. Hoping, you will always be holding my heart in your hand. I will understand the magical mystery does.
1-800-331-1212 now or reserve online.
Baby, I'm amazed the way you love.
As the Beatles went their separate ways, Paul McCartney fell in love and launched one of the greatest bands of all time, Wings. Wingspan, the ultimate Paul McCartney and Wings collection, available for the first time ever.
You'd think that people would have had enough of silly love songs.
40 digitally remastered tracks on 2 CDs.
Live and let die.
Includes 17 platinum singles from 9 #1 Paul McCartney and Wings albums. Over 2.5 hours of the best from Paul McCartney and Wings. When you purchase Wingspan through this special TV offer, you will receive an exclusive limited edition Wings pin. To order Paul McCartney's Wingspan 2 CD set and receive your free pin, call the number on your screen or send 1998 CD, 1598 cassette, plus $4.95 shipping and handling to the address on your screen. Must be 18 or older to call.
If you like blues.
Hey Jude, don't let me down. You have found her, now go and get her.
Back here on the Mitch Albom Show, our very special guest today, Sir Paul McCartney from, the Beatles. They weren't bad.
I heard of it.
And Wingspan is the story of Wings and how it was formed, and an inside look at Paul McCartney and his wife Linda, which airs on May 11th. On ABC, and then to follow the CD, a Wingspan, a 2-disc CD of Wings' greatest hits and other things. Paul McCartney, our special guest, here on the Mitch Albom Show. Here we are in the year 2001. Now, you went through the Beatles, maybe the best group of all time. You went through Wings. You went through your solo career. The Rolling Stones are still the same group, and they're still out there. What does Paul McCartney think when he looks at that band that started essentially the same time, and they're still there doing what they're doing, and you've been through so many different incarnations?
Well, I think it's okay, you know. I mean, they've had their differences, but their differences didn't break them up. As a band, we had our differences, and they did. In some ways, I'm now, looking back on the Beatles, it's a very complete body of work, and there's nothing left to prove with the Beatles. So in a way, I'm kind of glad. It's like I look at the Beatles' career, and it's like looking at Picasso's career. You go, boy, that was good. And so, you know, it's the same now with Wings. Now
How good did you think they were, though, the Beatles? I mean, everybody in the world is weighed in.
I thought they were the best band in the universe.
Did you think anything Wings did was better than what the Beatles did?
No, not really. No, I was very happy with the lineup, obviously, in the Beatles. I think we did amazingly well with Wings, though. And what happened was that as we went on, we started to kind of exceed some of the records and beat some of the records that the Beatles had done. So we played a place called the Kingdom up in Seattle, and we beat the Beatles' attendance record. So, you know, there were gratifying things like that. There was a record called Mother Can Tire, which outsold anything the Beatles ever did as a single, you know.
Yeah.
So we found that, and that's what's great about the Wingspan package, is that it all existed in the shadow of the Beatles. And this is the kind of myth, is therefore it wasn't any good. But when you look, well, for some people it wasn't. Actually, for a lot of people, they say, you know what, I prefer the Wings stuff. A lot of younger people actually prefer it because it was the soundtrack to their teenage years, whereas they were a little too young for the Beatles.
Which do you think was the best song that you wrote during your Wings period?
Well, I don't know, maybe I'm Amazed.
Yeah, well, it was pretty good.
That was pretty good.
Yeah, that wasn't bad.
That wasn't
Not
bad.
yeah.
And, you know, there were others, but you know, being forced to choose one, I'd go for that one.
Maybe I'm amazed at the way you pull me out of time. You hung me on a line.
If you could get back one thing that you've had to surrender for this long life in the public eye, both with the Beatles and then with Wings, just one piece, and you say, well, if I had that, I'd be happy, what would it be?
Personal privacy. That would be that. Because people say to me, how do you stay so sane, you know, after all that stuff and all the stuff you've been through? I said to him, well, it's easy in my mind. What I do is Paul McCartney, the famous Paul McCartney, is one sort of side of my mind. And he's famous. He goes and does shows like this. And he goes up on stage and does the big, you know, we hold a record for 184,000 people down in Brazil. Largest sort of concert ever. So that's the famous guy, goes and does all of that. But when I go back home to Liverpool or when I'm just private, that's me. That's the real me. And I'm able to kind of separate them. Only trouble is, I mean, I'm in New York at the moment, and I went out into Central Park the other day for a walk. Now, I'm thinking I'm the private me. But of course, the photographers and the fans and the people out there don't recognize this fact.
Yes.
They think I'm the famous guy.
Right.
And I know they've got it wrong.
Well, the problem is
so it's that privacy that I would love to be able to just switch and say, okay, no, sorry guys, I'm the private me. But you know, having said that, it isn't really a big problem. It comes with fame, and in actual fact, the way I play it actually gets me a lot of privacy. I mean, I showed up at a jazz club the other evening to see Les Paul, and we had a ball, man. I was just one of the audience. You know, Les pulled me up on stage, so the fame factor was there. But it was great. I was just in a crowd of music lovers, a lot of guitar players. So it works both ways. And I go up to Liverpool for like the New Year celebrations, and I can't get arrested in that crowd. they don't want to know me, man. You know, I'm just our Paul up there. So I get plenty of that privacy too. But that would be the answer to your question.
Well, you know what they say, you're never a hero in your hometown.
That's right, except I am.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you on, and the TV show is Wingspan on ABC on Friday, May 11th, and then it's followed by, it's going to be released around the world, and the Wingspan CD, which is a collection of both the hits and then what they call history, which is a lot of the other material. You got about 40 songs on this, which spans that whole career. I can't tell you what a pleasure it's been to get to know you a little bit, Paul.
Okay, guys,
All right,
and
thanks.
Gal, I can hear a gal in the background.
All right. Gal.
All right.
So that was Sir Paul McCartney, which was a thrill. And I basically said, okay, we can close the mics down, we can all go home, die happy, this is it, you know. That's two Beatles down. Now in the program. We had Ringo and Paul. So no, talk to George, and that's it. Yeah.
Then we'll start with the monkey.
No, no comparison.
Peter,
Sorry.
Mickey, Mike. Yeah. We will continue in the program. I do have to say that was a... I thought when he said that thing about the Rolling Stones, where I said, well, you know, how do you feel when you see the Rolling Stones still together and you guys aren't? I thought that was a pretty good answer when he goes, well, they had as many arguments as we did. They just didn't. It just didn't break them up. You know. I said, you know, and then he's right. The Beatles' body of work is done by itself. If they were still out making records, think of the Rolling Stones in the '60s. Had some great albums. They've had some albums in the '70s and the '80s that weren't so great. Now, if they had just stopped in the '60s, and that was the total body of work for the Rolling Stones. It began with, you know, one of the early ones and ended with, I don't know, Get Your Ya-Ya's Out or some Sticky Fingers or something like that. Then you might say, wow, the Rolling Stones, everything was perfect. Everything was great. Every song was wonderful. But because they, you know, stuck around, they ended up with the Steel Wheels and all the rest of the stuff. So it could be possible that there could be like a bad Beatles album out there somewhere. And you don't want a bad Beatles album out there because you have those perfect...
Right, they got out on top.
Right. So maybe that's a lesson for everybody that, you know, you know, there is a time to call it quits. Especially when John tells you you're stupid, I'm quitting the band, and you don't have much opportunity. Anyhow, appreciated that. Back with more here on the Mitch Albom Show, so please stay where you are.
Album!
Short order, I imagine, as our web geniuses, Gary Villapiano and Steve Shannon, will get the Paul McCartney interview, which just completed, up there on there, so you can hear highlights from that, which I thought it was great.
Yes.
You know, I mean, we've had, put it this way, we've had some people who have been very pompous, far more pompous on this program, with a lot less on their docket.
That's right.
And a lot less in their accomplishments than Paul McCartney. And you would figure if anyone, he rarely does interviews, if anyone had the, you know, the right to sort of be aloof or distant, you figure, well, the guy's been interviewed to death. You know, he never needs to talk to anybody else for the rest of his life. He's quite the
Down to
regular
earth.
guy.
Yeah.
Well, wait a minute. Since I'm not a Beatles guy, how is it to interview one of your heroes?
Well, I want to say he's a hero.
Well, come on.
No, my
Beatles.
heroes are my parents.
Yeah, I'm
my
talking
heroes
about,
are people.
yeah, okay, but you know what I mean.
He's somebody whose records I have a lot
but
of.
He is your musical
Well,
icon.
well, you saw me. I mean, was I
exciting.
sitting there quaking in my boots?
I got my own analysis. I'm just want to know what you thought
like
about.
you kind of get a certain feeling, like a kick out of it, like a wow. Whereas, you know, we don't, you know, we like everyone, we enjoy everyone in entertaining us on our program, but not everybody makes it like,
Yeah, but
wow, we're
he's
talking to this person, because everyone's
Well,
like everybody
look,
else.
there's two different parts of you when you do an interview like that. And I imagine if there are people out there who say, well, what if I were talking to Paul McCartney? There's the one that goes, wow, this is Paul McCartney. I would love to ask him this, that, the other thing. I'd love to get him to sign an album. But there's the other part of you, which is your job, which is I got to do an interview here. And that part kicks in when you're doing the interview. After it's over with, you know, you want to call people up and say, hey, we have Paul McCartney on. You know, that was fun. But I asked him what I wanted to ask him.
I know, but I still remember when we were in London, we went to see him. We all got snuck into a show they were filming in London, and after it was over, we were they put us right at the beginning of the stage.
And we were
after it
right
was over,
close
Mitch
to
said,
him,
I was
remember?
5 feet from him.
Well, you know what, Kenny,
So now,
and everybody
I'm
else,
just
if you can't get excited about meeting people
You know?
that you like or looking forward
that
to,
you
then
grew
you
up with, enjoy listening
yeah,
to
you
and
become too
entertaining
jaded.
you as
I'm
a
not
young
dogging it.
person.
Don't get me wrong.
I mean, you know, you'd be the same way if you met an original
would.
member of Rolls Royce.
No, come on, man.
You would.
Come, Rolls Royce.
Let's talk to Steve Courtney about the sports here on the Mitch Albom Show. Hi,
pull
Steve.
Rolls
Good one,
Royce
Mitch.
out.
Because I remember that car wash.
Car wash.
Nice to see you again, my friend. You know, me just being the sports guy of your fine program. Oh, I followed Naked News. I followed like the president of the Survivor fan club. Following Paul McCartney is a little bit different.
Yeah.
I can imagine all throughout this country somebody running to the TV and saying, I think Mitch is supposed to have Paul McCartney on.
And it's you.
And it's you.
I'm going to go mow the lawn right about now. Courtney, fella.
That's all right. You're integral to the program, too.
Did you know Dr. Laura is next door?
I do know Dr. Laura is filming there next door. I don't know if we can get an update.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if the people who are watching us on MSNBC, the cameras may want to shift around there. But Dr. Laura is broadcasting out of the studio right next door to us. Now, we're going to pull up the shade.
Very
and
exciting.
just take a little look. Now, there's the back of her head.